1945. We're also have his good friend, Mr. Doug Fisher, who the two of them are going to pass the microphone back and forth to tell his incredible story. And I hope you guys can show respect, sit back, listen, and really take something from what I know you're covering in class right now. So, everybody, let's welcome Mr. Doug Fisher and Mr. Lyt Anderson.
It's a privilege to introduce my friend of more than 70 years, a hero of the Battle of the Bulge. The Battle of the Bulge was the most bloody, pitched battle in the history of America. And Mr. Anderson was drafted into the Army after 1 year at Vanderbilt University at age 18. I'm going to ask him first to tell you a little about his schooling in Nashville before he went into the Army.
School life in the days when I went to school were much different than they are now. For instance, the police force that Vanderbilt now has almost 100 people. Back when I was in school, both there and high school, there was a night watchman there occasionally, but no policeman. We could take guns to high school. The reason we could take guns was because there was an armory there in the basement, and we could fire our weapons there, part of the ROTC program. We also had pocket knives. We carried them, nobody cared, nobody got hurt, nobody got killed. Pocket knives were used to sharpen pencils back in those days. Surely these two old men didn't fight a war, they couldn't have, but we did. And I have a lot of tales I can tell you about that, but I thought I'd give you a little bit about locally how things were here. Rationing was in effect. Outside there, instead of having a 4-lane highway, it was a 2-lane highway and had a streetcar that ran down the railroad track in the middle there all the way to the Belmead and circle in front of Warrenport and return.
Lyt, you could have brought some weapons that you brought back from Germany to show the class if you had been permitted to bring those weapons on the MBA campus, couldn't you?
I don't think they'd let me do it now, but they would back then.
Tell them what you could have brought back, what you did bring back.
Well, I could have brought back most any kind of weapon I wanted to. I brought back what I could carry in my duffel bag and what I could send through the mail. Actually, the U.S. mail delivered most of the guns that I sent back.
Lyt, when was the first day of the Battle of the Bulge?
Who made the first what?
The first day. When was it?
That was on December the 16th at 5:30 in the morning, about the heaviest artillery bombardment I ever hope to witness. Still left me deaf now. I still can't hear good, even with hearing aids on.
How did you get captured, and when did you get captured in the battle?
I got captured the morning of the first day. And I was in a truck on the highway right behind what is called the Schneeifel Mountain Front, which is a section of the Ardennes forest that my division occupied occupying with 3 infantry regiments, the 422nd, 423rd, 424th Infantry.
Did the Americans anticipate they would be attacked by the Germans?
I think those of us who were in earsight of the German lines anticipated it because we could hear tanks the previous night and report them back to headquarters, and they said they were just trying to rattle us because we were a new division. We'd only been there for a little less than 2 weeks and had been relatively quiet. Only artillery that ever came in was an occasional shell, and that all changed that day.
Why did the Americans not really anticipate this German counteroffensive?
I think all the way down to General Eisenhower, I think they were too optimistic about the German army having been run all the way back from Normandy beachhead was so decimated and broken up that it could never recover. Also, they were pinned down and the front had changed quite a bit in the Russian section. So both East and West were collapsing on the Germans. And I think Eisenhower probably just assumed without too much intelligence that they couldn't mount an offensive.
About how long was the battle line from start to finish?
Well, in the area I was in, only about 180 miles, but it stretched all the way from the North Sea down to the border of Switzerland, because the Third Army, where Patton was, he was down in the French and German area.
Where did the Germans come from, and where were you? And on what land were you? Were in Germany, France, Belgium? Where were you?
We were actually only 1 mile back behind the German frontier there, which ran along the Belgian-Luxembourg borders with Germany. The people that lived in that area, though, were all Germanic. They all spoke German. A few of them spoke French, but mostly it was 80% of the population was Germanic there.
What prevented your air support from learning that the Germans were massing right at the point where they entered through the forest?
The fog and rain and snow were so heavy that it just happened to give Hitler a break, and he could amass his troops in behind that ridge line, hidden from air observation during the daytime. Probably nobody ever noticed prior to that time how many troop loads of men and material that he had sent across the Rhine River towards the Ardennes. It's the best solution I can give.
Did you have any anticipation that the Germans would be sending 410,000 people against you in that battle?
No, I certainly didn't, and I don't think many people on the front line expected an attack in the strength that it did come. However, most of their strength was in their armor and their mechanized forces. And once they got spread out and bypassed the strong points, they became fairly vulnerable. Bastogne, you've all heard about the Battle of Bastogne. Bastogne was only about 20 miles from St. Vith, or Saint Vith, as they called it. And St. Louis capitulated after about 4 days of defensive hold off there, but it did spoil the German timetable. They had set St. Louis and Bastogne both to fall within the first 48 hours, which of course they didn't do, and it gave Americans time to bring up some reserves and throw them into the defense line in order to stop the German drive.
Now, tell about your capture on the first day of the battle and how that played out.
Well, I was in a weapons carrier, 3/4-ton truck, driving with minefield overlays to deliver to the infantry positions. And at 5:30 in the morning, this terrific artillery barrage popped around us and destroyed all the communications at each road in the section, which gave German a surprise element because they couldn't communicate back with headquarters to let them know what was going on at the front. At any rate, all of us who were in those vehicles and were trapped in the artillery barrage got out of our vehicles and got in the ditch behind the road and fired what ammunition we did have towards the approaching German columns, which at that time were about 3,000 yards away, a little bit too far to aim accurately where you knew you were going to hit somebody. So you couldn't really tell whether you were hitting anyone until they got up closer. As they got close to us, they started shooting mortar shells at us, which were pretty devastating, both to men and materials. We finally had to let a German officer come in under a white flag and tell us if we didn't surrender, they were going to bring a tank up and fire into us and kill us. So that officer got some other officer in another truck to agree to surrender us to him, and that's what he did.
How many of you were captured at that time, approximately?
I would say 50 or 60 men, and they marched us off the road immediately so they could bring the tanks and armored column and the infantry into that area and secure it so that they could occupy the entire area.
Was it the daytime in which you got captured?
Yes, it was. And they marched us at nighttime into an area that was really just a cattle field. Had a barbed wire fence in the back of it and a little ditch that ran down the middle of it. And we waited till dark. I did. And I watched the guard walk back and forth in the back of it. We had 2 guards back there. He'd walk to the ditch line, and then he and his comrade on the other side of the ditch would walk back to the end. And at that point, they were the furthest away. And it was snowing and foggy, and you couldn't see well. So I rolled over in the ditch and crawled under that barbed wire fence at the back that just had a cattle prod hanging down. It was easy to get under. And I followed that little ditch down till it came to a stream, and I knew the Owl River that spelled O-U-R, was down below us there. And I crawled in a log at the edge of that stream until morning because I couldn't see where I was going. However, I could see where the front was because the shells lit up the sky not too many miles away.
How did you find the American lines?
Well, I didn't really locate them until later on that afternoon as I made my way through the woods and tried to avoid German patrol as best I could. They were mostly on the road. There wasn't anything in the woods at that time except leftover American supplies that had been abandoned. And I got to the edge of the St. Vith defense perimeter, and some of my own engineer division, engineer regiment troops were there along with the 168th engineer.
How did they know you were not a spy when you came back to your own lines?
Well, they didn't know I wasn't a spy. They didn't know who I was, but I did know the password for the previous night, and I gave that, and they told me to stand up with my hands high above my head. I did that, and I walked forward, and after they interrogated me, I got back to St. Vith itself, where the rest of my S2 intelligence section was located.
How long after you were captured and got back to the American lines did the battle continue?
Well, it was continuing throughout that whole period, but the Germans had bypassed St. Vith temporarily as they had Bastogne to our south. Bastogne was about 20 miles south of us, and that's where our Corps headquarters was, and that's where the 82nd Airborne was trucked in to hold Bastogne.
Now the outfit that was holding Bastogne had some Tennessee people, didn't it? The 101st Airborne Division.
101st Airborne, of course, trained in Clarksville, but they were in Bastogne at the end. But the 82nd Airborne eventually came up to relieve us near Barack de Furture as we retreated towards the Meuse River. The German objective was to cut the American line in two and advance up and retake the port of Antwerp. Of course, the German chief of staff knew that couldn't happen because they didn't have that much strength.
Why did they call it the Battle of the Bulge?
Well, because to begin with, there was a small bulge in the German line where we had taken the defenses in the old West Wall fortifications there and used them as headquarters and platoon locations. But the final bulge was the bulge they made in our line that extended almost all the way to the Meuse River towards Paris.
What did you do after you returned to your unit, after you had been captured? For the rest of the battle, what did you do?
Well, after we got to the Meuse River, the British Army had sent some troops there, and we then went north to south of the town of Liège, and that's where we were struck by buzz bombs, which were an old bomb that was jet propelled, but it would make a terrific noise until it motor cut off, and then you didn't hear anything else till it hit the ground and exploded. I was there, and near our headquarters, and it made a huge crater, and I didn't take some pictures, but someone did, and I ended up with a few of them to show the depth and width of the crater.
After the Battle of the Bulge was over in January of 1945, what was your job in the Army until the end of the war? What did you do, and where did you go?
after we refurbished our equipment and troops and finally got a well-deserved bath after about 2 months, we crossed the river at Koblenz, Germany, and went south of that area. By that time, the German army was in full retreat, and about 100,000 prisoners had been taken, and they didn't have any place to put them. And they put them in a big field, and we built a barbed wire area around those Germans.
Lyt, we're getting near the end of the time, and I wonder if Mr. McMurray, if any of the students might have a question or two for Mr. Anderson.
Students or teachers?
When you were captured, did you get to see Hitler?
I didn't hear.
When you were captured, did you get to see Hitler?
Did I get to see Hitler? Just a picture of him hanging on the wall. No, I didn't get to see him.
You got to see some of his airplanes and tanks and soldiers, though, didn't you?
Saw plenty of them.
During your time in the Army, did you witness any of the concentration camps run by the Nazis?
Did you hear that? Did you witness any of the concentration camps?
Oh, no, I never visited a concentration camp because my division was scheduled to go to the Pacific sector, and I soon was given a pass to come back to the United States, and so I got back before the war in Japan ended, and I was in the United States at that time at Camp Leonard Wood, Missouri, and I never had to go to the Pacific. But I stayed in the reserve, and finally reached the rank of captain during the Korean War, but that was about the end of my service.
Everybody, thank you very much for sharing. Period. If you can stay and you have a question or so, I would imagine they could stick